Hey everybody, today I want to talk about building really simple HTTP APIs using JavaScript. Quick overview before we start. I'm going to describe what we're going to build. We'll take a look at how we can understand URLs, a diagram to better understand our API, and then we're going to get into coding and actually building the API. Awesome. So today what we're going to make is a coin flip API using Node and Express. And basically what's going to happen is we're going to send a request to flip a coin once or more, and then we'll get a response back based on if it's heads, tails, or how many times it was either one. Alright, with that out the way, let's take a quick look at how URLs work. We use URLs on a daily basis, I'm sure, and there's four main parts to it. So the first part's the protocol, which is in red, and this URL here is just me searching for the weather on Google. And protocol is HTTPS. Host name's google.com in blue, and then the slash after the host name is basically the endpoint or the resource, and there can be multiple slashes, but in this case we're just accessing the search resource of Google, and then separated from the endpoint is a question mark, and after the question mark comes parameters, which are key value pairs separated by an equal sign. So in this case, the parameters that we are sending to the search endpoint is Q, and Q equals weather. Now let's just take a quick live demo, and we will go ahead and do some of our own Google searches. So if I type in dog, right, and we'll get an answer from Google, right? Let's take a quick look at the URL here. At the very top, we have protocol, obviously HTTPS, Google, search, and then here comes the question mark, and then we have dog and some other stuff on the right side, which looks kind of crazy. Another thing that's very important to know is that if you want to send multiple parameters to a URL or an endpoint search in this case, each parameter is separated by this ampersand. So you can see Q, dog, OQ, dog. I'm not sure what these are. We don't work at Google, I'm assuming, and we can get somewhat of a look at what we're sending. Now if I get rid of all these, right, let me change my query to water, and now you'll see I never entered anything in the search box, but it changed because we changed the parameter here to the URL. Now what happens if we do like this, if we misspell water like that? Now you can see it corrected it to water, and this endpoint looks crazy, or these parameters I should say. Let's take a look at another quick example. Let's go to YouTube, and if I click on any video here, we'll see that this URL is going to change based on what I click on. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on this giant plane video, and we can see right here that the endpoint became watch, and then separated by this question mark is just one thing, v equals something. And one more thing to note is that you can also add another parameter in here, which we will right now. If you do ampersand t equals, and then let's say 30, this parameter right here, what happens is it basically skips to 30 seconds, and it interpreted this as another parameter to the endpoint, which is pretty cool. So you can actually modify the contents on the web page just by messing around up here. Awesome. Now that that's out the way, let's take a look at the quick diagram of what we're going to build for this coin flip API. So we're going to make two endpoints. The first one's flip coin, and then it should just respond with a heads or tails simple string response. And then we'll make another endpoint, which is pretty much the plural, flip coins, and separated by this question mark is a parameter, and we'll just call it times. We'll interpret the times on our API, and then we will respond with JSON instead of just a string value, just so we can be more official. Some other examples of HTTP APIs include Open Weather Map. So let's take a quick look at how they work. Open Weather Map. Let's take a look at their API docs. Go here. And then we can go down to, for example, zip code. And you can see that, for example, making this request, /data 2.5 weather, here comes the question mark, zip, is that, and then it will respond with JSON. And JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's just a way of arranging data. Makes it pretty easy to interpret when we're getting a response from the API. Alright, with that done, let's go ahead and start building this. Cool. I've opened my terminal, and I'm in my home directory. If I do pwd, it just shows where I'm at. You can make a folder wherever you want to build this thing, but I'm going to go ahead and just type mkdir make directory, and I'm going to call it coin flip API. Now, after we've done with this, I'm going to just open it in VS Code, and I can just type code coin flip API. So you can go about however you want to do this. Just make a folder and then open it up in VS Code. Now that VS Code's open, I'm just going to open a dedicated terminal within here. Let me close my terminal that I was using just now, and I'm just going to use the one in this window. And we're going to install only one thing this time using npm. So npm install. Also, if you don't have npm installed, you can go to the Node website and just install it there. npm install Express. Cool. Now while that's going, should be pretty quick. It's only one thing, right? Nice. And just generated node modules and package.json, package lock, I should say. And I'm gonna make one folder here, and this is just gonna contain pretty much all of our API code. Just call it server.js. Real easy. Here we go. Now we're ready. And first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna define a constant variable called express, and it's going to be equal to me just requiring the module that we just installed. Send in a string here, express. Nice. Now I'm going to define a second variable called app, const app equals, and then we're going to initialize the server. It just returns pretty much an express object, or an express application instance, I should say. Now with that done, all of our requires and initializations are pretty much complete, and we can go ahead and build this API. To make an endpoint, like we mentioned before, those forward slashes, you do app.get, or you can use app.post. Those are HTTP methods, but simply put, you can just do app.get. We'll just put a slash for now, and then after you do that, it takes a callback. So first you open up another set of parentheses. Let's just call this request response, and these two variables here that I've defined in the parentheses, after quickly just put a arrow, open brackets, hit enter, will make some space, and basically these two variables here automatically get populated with request information. So when someone sends a request to the API, like we saw, and then response information. So we can modify this to modify a response to the user. And let me add a semicolon here. Now I'm not even going to do anything, but just response.send, and then you open parentheses. I'm just going to send back a string saying hello, I work. That's it. So we've created our first endpoint handler, which is just going to be the slash. And now I'm going to add one more thing with the app, which is app.listen. And in here we can supply a port that we want to listen to. So I'll just do 5000. And then another callback. And this callback gets ran pretty much whenever the app is ready to go and listening. And I'm just going to do a console log. Oh, by the way, if you type log and hit enter in VS Code, it automatically populates this for you, which is pretty cool. I'm just going to say started server listening on port 5000. So this is the print statement, right? Awesome. Got this, and now I'm going to run the file within the terminal, like node, and then the file name, which is just server.js. Cool. So the console log obviously went, and it's listening on port 5000. Now let's open this up in a window. I'm just going to use incognito, why not? And in order to access this server, it's not on a certain website like www.blah. You just do localhost : and then the port number. We did 5000, right? You can see that we got a quick response, really easy. Localhost 5000, and if you add a / it's the same thing, because we've only added a handler for this endpoint, just a slash. And we're going to define another endpoint called flip-coin, flip-coin. So just another app.get, define the endpoint, start with a /flip.coin. And then here's our callback function. As mentioned before, the request parameter is automatically populated with the request from the client, or whoever's using our API. And then the response is going to be just whatever we want to respond with. And now let's be a little bit different here. We can define the logic for flipping the coin right now, but I just wanted to show you how Express handles sending parameters in the URL. So if you do response.send, and then in these parentheses here, instead of just sending a string value, I'm going to send something from the request parameter, which is going to be a field that represents everything in the URL that is a parameter. So you do request.query. And let's save that. Let's rerun it really fast. Here we go. Now, if we go to /flipcoin and no parameters, no question mark, it's going to be a blank object, just some brackets. Now, let's add something. Let's say hello equals yes. Now check that out. It automatically populated the field hello, the key, to map to this value yes. And we'll do another one. Let's say color equals blue. Now you can see that it matches the same order. Hello, yes first, then color blue. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more parameter just for fun, just to show that this really works. Let's say song sandstorm. Darude sandstorm. Haha. Okay, so here you go. Automatically populates based on whatever's going on over here, and this makes building these APIs super easy, as you can use the query field and then just extract whatever you need, assuming that the client or whoever is using this API sent it over to you. Awesome. So flip coin, we did mention in the diagram that it's not going to take any parameters. So let's just go ahead and define some logic here that's going to handle the the value of heads or tails. So first I'm going to create a value called, I'm going to define it as constant, so we're not going to change it. Let's do a const, random number, and JavaScript has a really cool library built in called math.random, or just the math object. And what this returns is it's going to return a random number between 0 and 1. So what we can do is just check if it's above 0.5 or below, and then from there we can just determine heads or tails. So let's also say let response equal, let's just say nothing for now, and we'll give it a value based on the output of random number. So this is super basic stuff, I'm going to do an if else like here. So if random number is less than 0.5, let's just assign the value. Hey man, don't call this response. I'm messing up here because we've already defined a response variable. So let's change that. Sorry about that. Let's just say coin. Let's say coin value. That makes more sense, right? All right. Yeah, there's some really cool built-in functions here. You can do if you highlight this and then do Control D or Command D if you're on Mac, you can highlight both and then modify them at the same time. Pretty cool. VS Code's awesome. So I'm gonna just give coin value, let's just say heads, and then if that's good, then we're gonna do the other condition where it could be more than 0.5, and then I'm just gonna call it tails. Hey, there it is. Okay. Now let's send coin value back. And yeah, let's have some fun. So boom, should be good. So we're no longer handling parameters here, but we will when we do flip coins. All right, ready? Flip coin, heads, tails. How about that? Pretty easy, right? Pretty cool. I'm doing Control-R to refresh, by the way, but you can just click and enter if you want to be a little slower. So yeah, it's working. Very nice. And now let's define our last endpoint. you can probably see by now that making these HTTP APIs in JavaScript is like super easy. So let's do flip coins, count coins. I don't know what that is. Haha. All right. Request. Damn, you hear that forced laughter? Haha. Gosh, I should get some sleep, huh? Okay. You know the deal. The usual. Now, what we got here is just like above, and we're going to take in one parameter. Do you remember how to access that? You do request. Man, do I even remember? Come on, shout at the screen. What was it? Was it request.query? Was it request.params? I don't remember, but I hope it was request.query. Let's just do const times is equal to request.query.times, like that, because remember that when it does the object response like we saw earlier, it's going to do whatever you sent in the URL. So for example, if it's like hello equals yes, it would be request.query.hello. But since we're going to be sending in times, we want to make sure that's request.query.times. And what I'm going to do here is I'm also going to console log times real quick. And then let's do response.send. We're not going to finish this quite yet, but we're going to just do response.send under development, because I want to just show what happens when you send the times parameter and when you don't, because I think our API should be able to handle if we are, using the right stuff or not. So we're going to rerun this server, of course. And now let's go ahead and do flip coins. Under development response as usual. But notice, it says undefined right now because we didn't send anything yet. So I'm going to modify this to just say times equals 5. And I hit enter. Now if I go back, you can see that now it's 5. So we really should be handling if the user is sending times or not. And that can be done with a very, very simple if statement. We do if times, and then we'll just define it here, else. You saw that I used a shortcut earlier to do the if else, but I typed it out here. And I'm just going to do response.send. Let's just, like, hey, you need to send times. And then here we'll just put response.send. Let me just paste it. And then I'm just going to say under development for now. Again, I don't know why I really should have deleted that line. It's all good. All right, now with that done, let's rerun it. And let's do this. So it still says under development. I forgot the value, of course, the exclamation mark. Now if I don't send it, check it out. We have some cool handling with our API here, which is awesome. Now, assuming that times, let's add another condition here. So let's say if times and times is greater than 0, because what if they send a negative value? That'd be kind of goofy, messing us up over here. So let's just retest it again. Let's just make sure that we're handling undefined and negative or non-positive values. So flip coins, right? That's normal. Now I'm going to modify this again. I'm going to say times is equal to 0. You can see that the output is still upset. Now if I do times is 10, very nice. We're handling this very effectively. Now we're pretty much just going to do the same thing here. We're going to define a very simple for loop. You know the deal. So let's do for let I equals 0. I is less than, come on man, this is like baby stuff. I is less than times, and then we will just increment I by 1 for each for loop iteration. Now I'm going to open this for loop, and we're pretty much going to take very similar logic from above, but now since we're doing it in multiple number of times, 1 or more, we're going to keep track of each heads or tails value. So first, let's just declare 2 variables. So just say heads, let heads equal to 0, and then we'll say let tails as well equals 0. And these variables are just going to keep track of how many times it was heads or tails. And then in the for loop body, I'm going to define constant variable, random number, very similar to before. I'll just make that math.random. Now we're going to take the similar if logic. I'm going to reuse that if-else shortcut, but if you don't have VS Code, you can always just, write it out yourself. The condition I'm going to check is if random number is less than 0.5, right? And if it is less than 0.5, we're going to just increment heads by 1. You can use the ++ shortcut there. And then if it isn't, we will increment tails by 1. Very cool. Now, by doing this, we need to send back a response to, the client or whoever's calling on our API. Instead of just doing response.send, I'm going to change this to do response.json, as we're going to return, JavaScript object notation, as we saw with that weather API. So let's just go back there real quick. Open weather map. Show a quick example of like a JSON response from an API that's used, in the real world. Go to docs. My favorite is if I just look up by zip code. So here's an example API response. You can see like it starts with brackets, just like mentioned before. Now let's go ahead and do it on our own here. So I'm going to open this up with brackets and open weather map. As you can see, has like something like a weather field, chord, base, main, all this stuff. We're going to just do 2 fields, which is heads. This is the first field, colon, and we're going to assign the heads field to the heads variable. And then we're going to do the same thing with tails, just assign it to the tails variable. Now, this looks pretty redundant, and you might be thinking, is there a better way to write this? And you can imply this kind of, written out heads, colon heads by just doing this. If the variable name is the same as the field name, you can do this and you'll get the same result, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and change this to tails. All right, just add a space in front and at the end, just for some, make it look a little prettier. So there you go. Here is our finished Flipcoins API. Why don't we take a quick look and see what happens? So I'm going to rerun node, and then back in our thing, let's go ahead. Cool. So times, we sent in 5, we got 4 tails and 1 heads. Let's do times is 50. There you go, 24, 26. I'll refresh the page with Control R. Oh, pretty good, pretty biased towards tails, you can see. Then I went to heads. So we can see that's pretty, it's pretty reliably random. Around 25, 25, right? 50-50 chance. Say we have 500. Now I doubt you have 500 coins on you to flip all at once. So you can use this API that you've just built to, simulate it. Pretty cool. All right, with that done, let's take a quick look back at our diagram of what we built. So we have a Flipcoin endpoint, right? And we know that works. Let me just split the windows. So here's our diagram. We will just go to localhost 5000 /Flipcoin, right, heads, tails. You can see that I'm refreshing it on the right and it's behaving very similar to what we've expected. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the Flipcoins API once real quick, just to prove that, we got the real deal. Remember the question mark, and then times equals, let's do like 1000, why not? Cool. Pretty close, 500, a little over 500, a little under 500. I wonder if we get a 500, that'd be pretty cool. Nice. So with that done, why don't we call on this API with some JavaScript code on the other side? Meaning that we're going to write some code here that's going to use HTTP to send a request and get a response back. We'll just see this API in action. We'll invoke it with other code instead of manually with this URL. So I'm going to hop back in the VS Code window, and I'm going to make a new file called client.js. And just before I start writing out this client.js file, it's going to be about 5 lines of code. I'm going to do npm install. We're going to install a quick other dependency called node fetch. And that should go pretty fast. Okay, telling me to upgrade my npm, but I don't have to do that right now. Nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to import a function called fetch, and using the require function built into node, I'm just going to do require node fetch. Cool. And what you can do with this fetch function is you can make HTTP requests to really anywhere. It doesn't have to be locally to the internet, wherever you want. And in our server, right, it's running on localhost 5000, so we can pretty much make a call to that endpoint, URL. So we start with HTTP, of course, the usual protocol. Localhost :5000 / flip. I'm going to do flip coins, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And then let's just do, I don't know, times is 40. All right. Now, how do we extract the value from this call? You might be wondering. I'm going to make a new line right under it, and I'm going to do .then. And basically what's going to happen here is when we make a call, using HTTP, we need to wait for a response. And by using this .then, this will wait for a response back from our API. And then we can use this callback function res, an arrow, and then a body. And this parameter will be automatically populated by whatever the server responds with. And we could print it out, but if you try to print this out, and you can on your own if you'd like to, it does come out with a bunch of gibberish, like all this HTTP, response info. And if we only care about the body, the body of the response, which contains the coin data, we can just return res.json like this. And then res.json also takes what's called it's an asynchronous function, you could think of it as, but simply put, you're going to need to use another .then, so it's kind of chained like this. And then we will say, I'll just define this as data. You could, rename it as res if you want. And then let's just console log using the shortcut log on VS Code. And then I'm just going to print out data. I'm going to get rid of this line. Nice. So what's happening here is client is using the fetch function. Let me bring back the diagram. You could pretend the client's over here, and it's using fetch to, go to flip coins and then respond with JSON. And I was going to mention why we're using the plural flip coins instead of flip coin. And this is because flip coins, right, it returns a JSON response if it's valid. And if it didn't return a JSON response, for example, like a string here or up top, this also returns a string value, it wouldn't work. We wouldn't be able to parse this as JSON. Right. So yeah, let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So node client. Oh, before I run this, also in a separate terminal, you can use this function or this button here to split it. But I'm just gonna run server, make sure this guy's running, and then now we're gonna go ahead and call it. Boom. There you go. So pretty cool, right? We wrote some client code, and the client's calling on the server, right? Let me just change this to like 400. I'm gonna clear this. Nice. How about that? So it's pretty cool. You can pretend that the client can represent like a web page. You click a button, the button's going to invoke fetch, right, to flip a coin, and then servers, not directly connected to the client. It's running on its own, and we use fetch to bridge the gap between the two like we saw. Pretty cool. Well, with that being said, I hope you learned something. I had a lot of fun, and I will see you next time.